Sofia had never been the type to stay out late, but that evening was different. She had just finished a long shift at work, and her boss had insisted she complete an urgent task. By the time she was done, the once vibrant streets of Lagos had begun to thin. The city's usual chaos had given way to a deceptive calm, and she found herself rushing to the bus stop near Ojota, hoping to catch a ride home to Ikorodu. The yellow Danfo bus that stopped in front of her looked like any other. The conductor, a lanky man with red eyes and a hoarse voice, shouted, "Ikorodu straight. No stopping, enter with your change." A few passengers were already inside, their faces unreadable in the dim light. Without a second thought, Sofia stepped in and took a seat at the back, unaware that her night was about to turn into a nightmare. As the bus sped down the highway, Sofia's initial relief at finding a ride home turned into unease. The conductor had stopped calling for more passengers, even though there were still empty seats. The driver, a burly man with a thick scar across his left cheek, kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror. The other passengers seemed oddly silent. A man sitting 2 seats ahead of her kept shifting uncomfortably, and the woman beside her gripped her bag tightly. The air inside the bus felt heavy, and Sofia's heartbeat quickened. Something was wrong. She reached for her phone, wanting to text her friend that she was on her way, but as she pressed the power button, she realized her battery was dead. Panic crept in. The roads were unusually empty for Lagos, and the bus was veering into less familiar routes. "Oga, this is not the way to Ikorodu," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. No one responded. The driver suddenly pulled the bus into a dark, deserted area off the main road. Sofia's heart pounded as the doors slammed shut. Before she could scream, the conductor lunged at her, clamping a rough hand over her mouth. She kicked and struggled, but the other men in the bus restrained her. Tears blurred her vision as fear and helplessness took over. The woman beside her, whom she had thought was a fellow passenger, now stood up, revealing a cruel smirk. "Just cooperate, and it will be over quickly," she said. Pain, terror, and betrayal consumed Sofia as the men took turns violating her. The once familiar city of Lagos had become a prison, the very streets that had always bustled with life now bearing silent witness to her agony. When it was over, they tossed her out of the bus like garbage, leaving her battered and broken by the roadside. Sofia lay on the ground for what felt like an eternity before she found the strength to move. Her clothes were torn, her body ached, and her soul felt shattered. With trembling hands, she gathered what was left of her dignity and stumbled toward the nearest streetlight. A motorcyclist slowed down when he saw her. "Sister, wetin happen?" he asked, concern in his eyes. Sofia opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, silent tears streamed down her face. The biker, sensing the horror she had been through, helped her onto his bike and took her to the nearest police station. At the station, she sat in a cold, metal chair, barely able to speak as she recounted her ordeal to an indifferent officer. He sighed, scratched his head, and mumbled, "These things happen for Lagos. You dey sure say you no follow them willingly?" His words stung more than her wounds. She was drowning in pain, and yet, even in this moment, she had to prove she was a victim. Days turned into weeks, and the scars on her body began to fade, but the ones on her soul remained raw. The police did little to investigate. Her family urged her to move on, fearing the stigma that came with speaking out. Friends she once trusted kept their distance, unsure of what to say. But Sofia refused to be silenced. She found a support group for survivors and began to share her story. Slowly, she reclaimed her voice, realizing she was not alone. With the help of a few determined activists, she pushed for an investigation, even though the system seemed designed to fail victims like her. Healing was not easy, and justice was not swift, but Sofia refused to let her trauma define her. She turned her pain into purpose, becoming an advocate for women's safety in Lagos. Though the nightmares still haunted her, she knew one thing for sure: she had survived, and she would fight to make sure no other woman suffered in silence.
Thank you for watching Story Bees. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing African tales and bedtime stories. See you next time and keep the stories alive.